Yeah.
Finance matters. We will be taking questions from the media later on. So without further ado, I will now pass you over to the Honorable Con Imbert, Minister of Finance.
Minister excused.
Okay, good afternoon. Sorry to keep everybody waiting. We had some technical to sort out camera angles, and we are doing the best we can in terms of the angle right now. This afternoon, I'd like firstly to speak about the government guaranteed loan program for small and medium enterprises, which was designed and implemented during the beginning of the COVID-19 period last year. Now, let me take you back. The original criteria for qualification for an SME loan was the provision of up-to-date VAT certificates or evidence of the entity being up-to-date with their VAT payments, their income tax payments, corporation tax payments, and NIS payments for those SMEs who would have a minimum of 5 employees, which is the minimum number for NIS. The features at the time were a government guarantee of 75% of the loan amount. Applicants were required to provide standard credit information and collateral to support the remaining 25%. The repayment period was 5 years, inclusive of a 24-month moratorium on payments. The interest was free because the interest on the guaranteed loan program was paid by the government, and there were no handling fees passed on to the participants. The original purpose of the loan, or purposes, payment of salaries, working capital requirements, purchase of raw materials, essentially operational expenditure. In implementing this program, the banks recognized that several applicants were having difficulty in moving from the application stage to the disbursement stage of the loan program. The biggest problem was in the area of statutory requirements. 47% of the persons who were turned down for one of these SME loans were unable to provide evidence of up-to-date VAT payments, income tax, corporation tax payments, and NIS payments. So virtually half of the persons who were not successful in accessing one of these loans could not satisfy the banks that they were up to date with respect to value-added tax, income tax, corporation tax, and national insurance. The second problem, which was manifested itself, or the second problem manifested itself in the inability of persons to satisfy the banks. 16% of applicants could not meet the minimum debt service requirements, and the debt service requirements were specifically lowered from the standard banking arrangements for this program. A number of applicants could not provide any financial statements of any kind whatsoever, and there were several other issues in terms of weak financial indicators, weak liquidity, businesses running at a loss continuously, and so on. So, since this program was designed to help we decided to do a review. And over the last 6 months, I have been doing a review with the central bank, who I asked to meet with the commercial banks, also meet with the larger organizations representing business, Chamber of Commerce, TTME, etc., and some of the other organizations as well, to try and establish what are the issues, what is the problem, and what can be done to deal with these issues. What we've come up with is a revision of the program where we are now going to extend the period of repayment from 5 years to 7 years. The government will now guarantee 100% of the loan amount. The purposes for the loan will be expanded beyond salary payments, working capital, and the purchase of raw materials to fixed assets, plant and machinery, things of that kind, expansion of accommodation, etc. We will increase the amount of the loan available as required, and we are going to go back in time in terms of the requirements for persons to be up to date with their statutory obligations, such as up to date with value-added tax, income tax, corporation tax, NIS, and we're taking it back to the year end 2018, so that the applicants will now must show that they are up to date with taxes and NIS payments up to 2018, and they'll be given 1 year after they get the loan to bring themselves fully up to date. We believe that in so doing, and we're also changing the threshold so that we're lowering the threshold for access to the facility to $500,000 annual turnover, which isn't much for a small business, but we thought that that's the threshold for value-added tax registration, $500,000. So that will be the minimum amount where someone can now qualify for one of these very soft loans, if I say so myself. And the maximum we're now taking it to 25 million, so that small and medium enterprises will now be defined as entities, companies with revenue of between $500,000 and $25 million per year, annual revenue. The interest rate remains zero. It's all taken up by the government, and the repayment period now stretches out to 7 years. One of the things we were finding before is persons were unwilling to provide collateral for the loans, even though the government was guaranteeing 75% of the loan. Companies only wanted to give personal guarantees for the 25% portion. So by now, the government taking up 100%, that problem has gone away, so that the applicants no longer would have to put up any security for the loan. The government will guarantee all of it. So let me just repeat. We are now going to increase the repayment period to 7 years. First 2 years, no payments required, zero interest, and threshold will now be 500,000 to 25 million. And the loan can be used for a number of different things, not just operational expenses, but also fixed assets, plant and machinery, and so on. We do believe, after all the consultation we've done, that this will assist tremendously in allowing persons to access these facilities. We're also backdating the statutory obligations back to 2018, so once people are up to date, up to the end of 2018, they qualify. We will not ask them for 2019 or 2020, but we give them 1 year to get themselves up to date for 19 and 20. So that is the small and medium enterprise loan. I will deal with questions on that in a while. The other thing I'd like to talk about is Trinidad and Tobago's credit rating. Now, last year, and I thought this was quite an achievement, in the midst of COVID, we were able to affirm our investment grade rating with Standard & Poor's. It wasn't easy. It was very difficult. That was just around 3 months into COVID. May, June 2020. A year later, COVID continues. All sorts of issues with respect to public health restrictions, closing down certain sectors of the economy, making it even more difficult for us in terms of loss of revenue and so on, GDP, etc. So we thought this time going into our annual rating with S&P, we'd have it hard, and it wasn't easy. But I was very pleased that the team that we assembled, the Ministry of Finance team and our external consultants, were able to persuade or convince or assure Standard & Poor's that our investment grade rating should be affirmed at BBB-. I thought that was an even greater achievement than in 2020. The outlook was revised from stable to negative, but that's understandable, because nobody has a crystal ball and nobody knows how long COVID will continue for, and therefore I was not surprised. What I was pleased about is that we maintained our investment grade rating. Of course, the critics out there don't seem to like to focus on the positives, they like to focus on the negatives. But I will give you some of the positives in the Standard & Poor's rating. S&P told us that they expected a decline in energy production, and this is one of the problems we were facing. Because of COVID and other reasons, gas production was down significantly, much more than anticipated. Gas prices were down at the time. Gas prices have had a little uptick now. So that caused a significant loss of revenue and production in the energy sector. But S&P has stated that they expect the decline in energy production to reverse over the next 2 years and the economy to return to growth by next year. That is a very positive statement as far as I am concerned. With respect to the way we have dealt with the pandemic, we were able to demonstrate to S&P the government's vaccination program, the rate at which we were vaccinating people, the quantity of vaccines that were on their way, already paid for and to come. And that too played a significant role in S&P's rating in terms of looking at our potential to recover from the pernicious effects of the pandemic. S&P also pointed to our large liquid financial assets, which we have managed very prudently. I want to repeat that despite a number of withdrawals over the last several years, the Heritage Stabilization Fund is still more or less what it was in September 2015. I think it's a very significant achievement, and I would like to compliment our investment managers, and I can only see that we could get better as we go along. We also have significant reserves. The way Standard & Poor's described it is solid, if declining, central bank reserves. So that S&P saw our reserve position to be quite good, our Heritage Fund to be in good shape, and they saw recovery in the energy sector over the next 2 years. They indicated that they had determined that petrochemical plants, most of them have reopened following temporary closures, while production is carded to increase because of the Ruby project, the HV Billiton, and a number of other projects that are already in the implementation stage and also in the pipeline. S&P also said that Trinidad and Tobago is a sustained overperformer in external metrics and income levels compared with BB rated sovereigns, that's the notch just below, supported by a strong liquid asset position. And they also felt that the deterioration in per capita income levels, which seemed to be important to some commentators, may be temporary. But I'd like to make some comparisons which the critics never make. I have asked for an assessment of credit ratings throughout the region. Firstly, the CARICOM region, then the wider Caribbean, then Latin America. When I look at Latin America and the Caribbean, of those countries that are assessed by Standard & Poor's, Trinidad and Tobago has by far the highest credit rating of any country within CARICOM. I want to repeat that. Our credit rating with Standard & Poor's is by far the highest of any country in CARICOM. We are investment grade, BBB minus, and Jamaica, for example, is B+, quite significantly down the scale. Barbados is B-. Grenada is in selective default. Venezuela is in selective default. I'm going into the wider Caribbean now. Suriname is in selective default. Belize is in selective default. We are higher than Colombia, a significant emerging economy. We are at BB. We are at BBB. We are better than Paraguay, better than Brazil, better than Guatemala, better than Honduras, better than the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, Bolivia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Argentina. We have a better rating than Argentina. They have a CCC. We have a BBB. So that when you look at Trinidad and Tobago in the regional context, we have the best credit rating in CARICOM. One of the best in the entire Caribbean. I'm not sure there's any Caribbean country better than us, except Bermuda, if you consider Bermuda to be a Caribbean country. I don't. Aruba, if you consider that to be a Caribbean country. And within the whole Latin American region, we are way ahead of most of the other countries in Latin America. And I want to repeat: Colombia, Paraguay, Brazil, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, etc. Argentina, we have a better credit rating than them. And therefore, I would ask the critics to be more holistic in the examination of the facts, instead of trying to describe Trinidad and Tobago as a basket case. It's nonsense. We're doing quite well. If I can move on now to the salary relief grant, because questions are asked about that from time to time. If I can give a report on 2020, the number of grants, salary relief, I'm not talking income support here, paid so far 91,393 grants for a total value of $147.8 million. We also have a number of prepaid cards which we gave to persons who don't have bank accounts, and the number of cards that we have produced so far is 6,367, of which over 3,000 have already been delivered, and another 2,000 out for delivery. So that's the 2020 situation. If I go now to 2021, as of the 16th of August, 4,070 persons have received salary relief grants for a total payout of about $12 million. in terms of applications, I've screened 14,747 applications. The total applications submitted was 24,000. We've screened almost 15,000 of those. And on every 2 or 3 days, we are issuing payments at the order of 500, 700. On one particular day, the 27th of July, we issued 1,836 payments, and the grant process is continuing. We actually separate out for Tobago, and there was 774 applications in Tobago, which are being processed. The types of areas where the applications came in, the vast majority would have been in the bar, restaurant, retail sector, with a distribution among the other sectors. But if I look at it, I see that the majority, retail outlets, almost 10,000, 9,003. Food, restaurant services, close after that, 8,006. Members clubs, casinos, 1,109. And then it goes down into other categories such as hairdressers, barbers, sporting facility employees, etc. So that we have a unit fully operational, which is continuing to process, examine the grant applications, and it's paying them by way of direct bank transfer. I just want to digress now to a comment I saw from the opposition with respect to the governor of the central bank. And I saw the leader of the opposition castigating the governor of the central bank after he had given his financial stability report on August 5th, complaining about him and essentially describing the governor of the central bank in the worst possible terms. But if I read from the financial stability report, what I see in terms of the performance of the domestic financial sector, which is one of the core functions of the central bank, one of its main responsibilities is to manage and supervise financial sector, insurance companies, banks, etc., and make sure there's stability and those sectors are safe and the public is protected. And if I read from the financial stability report, I see that despite COVID, the financial sector remained resilient, even though there was this unprecedented economic shock. The soundness indicators for the banking and insurance industry suggest that the risks related to the pandemic were largely contained. Institutions maintained healthy capital and liquidity buffers while dealing with deterioration in asset quality and profitability ratios. The initial impact of the pandemic adversely affected pension sector investment portfolios, but asset valuations have since recovered and improved by the end of the year. And again, in the financial stability report, the governor reported that although profitability and asset quality slipped, and this is in the first year of COVID, the performance of the banking sector remained robust in 2020. Capital levels at banks remained well above the new regulatory minimum capital adequacy of 10% under the new rules, which came into effect in May 2020. And it demonstrates that the financial system has significant loss absorbing capacity. The insurance industry, when I look at it, was relatively stable in 2020, in spite of the economic shock of COVID. Assets actually expanded by over 2% in 2020 in the insurance sector. So that when I look at what the central bank is supposed to be doing, which is to make sure that depositors are protected in our commercial banks and customers are protected in the insurance sector, what I see is that the central bank has been doing a very good job. And all the indicators and the parameters demonstrate that the central bank has been managing the banking and insurance sector quite well. If you look at inflation, that's another responsibility of the central bank, along with the government. Inflation has been contained at 1% or less. In terms of money supply, we have no shortage of money supply in Trinidad and Tobago. We have liquidity, sometimes crossing $10 billion on any given day. So there's a more than adequate money supply. Inflation is 1% or below. Banking sector stable, well managed, well supervised. Insurance sector stable, well managed, well supervised. So that the comments of the leader of the opposition were completely baseless, groundless, devoid of fact, and just, I don't know why the leader of the opposition would launch that attack on the governor of central bank for doing such a good job. Confused me. I think it's just one of these things where they just make up stories inside of there, just throw out things. As I've said before, as I said in one of my tweets, you had two members of the opposition talking out of two different sides of their mouth. One saying he's worried about borrowing and we must stop borrowing. Another, and we must stop withdrawing from the Heritage Fund. So in other words, if you stop borrowing, you stop withdrawing from the Heritage Fund. In a pandemic, with a fiscal deficit that is unforeseen, you have to stop spending money, you have to send home thousands of public servants, you have to stop paying out old age pension. That is the consequence of following that advice. Stop borrowing, stop withdrawing from the Heritage Fund in a pandemic. So that one of them saying that. The next one saying borrow like you're mad. Use foreign loans and just give away money to small and medium enterprises. Don't just give it away. In the same press conference. So that I really have difficulty with the things that they say. I think I've gone through most of the points, except I just want to reiterate, as you have seen some advertisements in newspapers, that we have a tax amnesty in progress. The tax amnesty is scheduled to run at this time. I can extend it, if need be, to the 17th of September. And the taxes covered under the amnesty, which would be waiver of penalty and interest on unpaid taxes such as income tax, health surcharge, corporation tax, business levy, green fund, value-added tax, petroleum profits tax, stamp duty, club gaming tax, etc. And the Board of Inland Revenue is doing its best to ensure that persons can make these payments and avoid the penalties and interest, and this runs until the 17th. And I would urge everyone who has had difficulty in the last year or so to take advantage of this amnesty, if they can, of course, and try their best to pay the outstanding taxes before the 17th of September, because on the 17th, the current law will return. And basically, that's it for now. I will now answer any questions posted.
Thank you, Minister. Just before we proceed, we kindly ask the media representatives to kindly identify yourself before you pose the question. Good day, reporter.
Good afternoon, Minister. Elizabeth Williams, TV6 News.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon again, Minister. I know you spoke about the salary relief grant and you were specific to Tobago. Some persons are also asking, they have contacted the officials at the salary relief office and they have asked those who have not been paid last year, were asking where are their monies, and they were being told by these officials they don't have an update on the matter. I just wanted to know also from you any sense of how much the government has spent with respect to the COVID response to date in terms of a cost to date, and will this cost impact on the upcoming budget?
Okay. I've discovered that there are quite a few people in Tobago, as in Trinidad, who have mixed up the two grants, the income support grant and the salary relief grant. And in fact, I was going through a long list of names sent to me by our people in Tobago with respect to persons making that complaint, that they applied for the salary relief grant in 2020 and they haven't got it, and they're waiting on feedback. So I got the names, the addresses, the ID card numbers, and so on, because I decided that this was something that was cropping up on a regular basis, this complaint. And I sought to investigate it, and every single one of them had not applied for a salary relief grant. They had applied for income support grant from the Ministry of Social Development. But for some reason, rather than going to the Ministry of Social Development to find out what had happened with the application, because the application was actually made to the Ministry of Social Development, they were still pursuing this matter with the Ministry of Finance, and we only deal with the salary relief grant. So I have since advised our people in Tobago of this, and I hope that this message can get out, that persons just check carefully and see which grant you applied for, whether it's a salary relief or whether it's income support from social development. Now, if there are, however, some salary relief grant applications that are still there, we will keep searching for them and trying to find them. And it became quite confusing because people were talking about they're up to date with the NIS and all that sort of thing. And I said, but okay, when I go and check the database, I'm not seeing their names. And then I sent that information back, and I went back to the people and said, look, Finance is saying they're not seeing your names. Are you sure you didn't apply for the income grant? And then it came out, it was the income support grant. So there's quite a little bit of confusion there, and we will try our best to try and clarify it as best as we can. In terms of the total on COVID, we have crossed the $5 billion mark. We intend to provide as much relief as we can. And certainly in the next budget, there will be an amount for COVID relief, residual COVID relief going forward into 2022. I don't know if that answers your questions. Kavita.
Hi, good day, reporter.
Good afternoon, Minister Imbert, Rishi Harinana, Rhythms Communications Network. Minister, I wanted to find out, we've gotten reports from some people saying that money has not been given to the Ministry of Social Development, and so people are still waiting for grants that they would have applied for. Can you say if money have been given to the Ministry of Social Development, how much? Also, can CAL workers who lost their jobs apply for salary relief grant from the ministry? And there's one other question. The Prime Minister would have indicated that you all will be looking at giving assistance to the bar owners and the bar industry. Now, I understand, if I recall correctly, this was supposed to take place since 2020 when the initial plan was to assist these bar owners. As far as we understand, none has been given to them just yet. Is assistance going to be given to them, and if so, when is that likely to happen?
Okay, could I ask from now on, people ask one question instead of a 3-part or a 4-part question? Because when you have so many parts in the question, by the time you get to part 4, part 1 is lost. So, with respect to funding sent to social development, whatever funding is required to be sent there, we send it as promptly as we can. That ministry consumes a lot of money, billions and billions and billions of dollars. So that we are constrained. It's an important ministry. It deals with relief. We are constrained in this ministry to send any amount of funding that they require. Right now, as we speak, we are making arrangements for supplementary allocations for the Ministry of Social Development, very significant sums of money. I don't know if there's confusion about the application process for the income support grant. I can't say. With respect to the salary, because we don't manage that grant. With respect to the salary relief grant, this has been well advertised. We gave grants for May. We've taken that into June. We haven't made any decision as a government on grants for July yet. And there were cut-off dates and deadlines which were extended on several occasions. The application process was very straightforward. And you can see that from the fact that over 30,000 persons registered, and in fact, over 24,000 applications came in for that period. It was online, it was user-friendly, so that I'm not sure exactly what you mean about how people could apply for the grant, because for the May and the June, the deadlines have long passed, so the portals have been closed. We may look at July to see if we have funding and we can assist with July. We may open up for particular sectors for July, but that decision has not yet been made. If it is made, then an announcement will be made and people can apply for the grant. With respect to the bar owners, I recently had a virtual meeting with the representatives of the association, and what we are looking at with them, because one of the biggest problems they had is the informality of that sector. People not registered. So people not registered for NIS, they're not registered for health surcharge, they're not registered for tax, and therefore the record is just not there. It's a very informal sector. So it was very, very difficult for the bar operators and owners to comply with the basic minimum requirements. So we're looking at ways and means how we could help that sector, because they've been closed for a long time. And we're going to relax some of the requirements, but not to the extent of a free-for-all. And I expect within the next couple of weeks, we'll reach some sort of position with them. We had a very good meeting. They had to come back to me to make proposals and so on. And we will settle all of this in the next couple of weeks. And we may deal with them as a special case so that their employees can get the relief that they require. But I want to stress one of the biggest problems is the informality of that sector and the fact that many of these employees are not in the system. They don't exist anywhere in any system, LHSR system, NIS system, or anything like that. But, we have to, go a little easy, because this is a sector that has been closed for quite a while.
The Day Reporter.
Good afternoon, Minister. Priya Bihari, AZPnews.com. Good afternoon. I wanted to find out about the $179 million euro loan that you got from China. Have we spent any of that yet? And I think 50% of that would have to go to the Chinese goods and services. Has that been done? And right, I have another question. I don't know if I can ask it afterwards or no.
Ask it afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. We haven't drawn down on that loan yet. We haven't finalized the terms yet. We are almost at the final stages of discussing the terms of that loan. So we haven't spent a cent of it yet, and we haven't drawn down a cent of it. And I want to make that point in the context of vaccine purchases. I saw a lot of uninformed commentary outside in the system from people who should know better, that we are accessing above market loans to buy vaccines. All of that is nonsense. All of the vaccines that we purchased so far, we have used our general revenues because of the importance of it. We didn't wait for anything. So we have used general revenues earned by the Ministry of Finance from taxation and wherever to purchase vaccines. With respect to that Chinese loan, 15% of it, yes, has to be spent on Chinese elements, which is goods and services out of China, could be anything. And we have not finalized or drawn down on that loan yet, which, by the way, is at 2%. That's the interest rate.
Right, you had a second question?
Yes, Minister, just to zoom in on Liz's question, can you give us an idea in terms of how much money we have spent in terms of the procurement of vaccines at this point in time?
I had given an estimate previously. of just over $100 million, and I had indicated that if we're going along the pathway that we were going, that we would spend somewhere maybe 120, 130 million on vaccines. The actual expenditure so far is still in the 70 to 75 million TT dollar range. We've had quite a lot of donations, as you know. The Pfizer vaccines that came recently were a donation. The AstraZeneca from Canada was a donation. We have not yet been called upon by the Africa Vaccine Alliance Trust to pay for the Johnson & Johnson vaccines, except for the first batch that is now on its way, about 100,000 of them. We've made a down payment for that. That's why we're up to about 75 million or a little bit more in terms of TT dollars for vaccines. And I still think we will round out at the number that I had projected earlier, $120 million, somewhere in that vicinity for vaccines, but we're getting far more vaccines than originally anticipated, as you know.
Good day, reporter. Hello, Anthony.
Good afternoon, Minister. Anthony Wilson from the Trinidad Express. I have several questions, but I'll ask one at a time. How many companies were successful in applying for the SME loans last year?
Just 1 second. $272.
Anthony, you had another question?
And just as a matter of clarification, how many applications were there?
There were in excess of 300 applications. The way the information has been presented to me is the fact that 272 applicants were approved. In terms of the total, it was in excess of 300. I don't have the exact figure with me right now. But what I can tell you is the loans that where the people ran into difficulty, they were mostly in the services sector. And as I indicated previously, because of the applicant's inability to supply relevant statutory requirements. So I don't know if that assists you. I can see if I can get more detailed information for you. But it's 272 loans approved. Next question.
Hi, good day, reporter.
Hi, afternoon. Chantak of Newsday. Are you all hearing me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to, well, I think this question may have been partially answered, but this is in relation to the purchase of vaccines by the Africa Medical Platform. Now, the Prime Minister mentioned touched on it a little bit on the weekend just gone. He said that the figure which we may have to pay for these vaccines may not be as much as the previously anticipated. I was just wondering if we could have gotten a sense as to the quantities of vaccine we might be looking at, and what may have been the original figure, and what could be the new figure now that we may have to pay for said vaccines.
The vaccines that we have committed to purchase from the African Vaccine Alliance Trust, 800,000 single-dose Johnson & Johnson. In terms of what will eventually play out, that is merely speculative at this point in time. Nobody has an exact number, but that's the figure that we are contracted to pay for, 800,000 single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccines, of which we have already paid for the first 108,000. That payment was made towards the end of last week, because the way that system was set up is that you had to pay a down payment. There were a lot of legal agreements that had to be negotiated, vetted, signed, and so on. A down payment had to be made right away at the start, a couple of months ago. And then as they send or they prepare to send you batches, you pay for that. So we've paid the down payment, and we've paid for 108,000 vaccines from Johnson & Johnson via the African Vaccine Alliance Trust, which will arrive in the near future, I hope.
I believe you have another question from Elizabeth.
Good afternoon again, Minister. Elizabeth Williams, TV6 News. Wanted to know from you in terms of the high cost of food prices. Some members of the public are complaining when they go to the grocery. When they are going to the grocery right now, a number of items have increased. Is the government looking at this? And will there be a focus on agriculture in the upcoming budget?
Well, I know there's a view that the Minister of Finance is the Minister of everything, but I'm not. What I can tell you is that we haven't increased any taxes on foods in this fiscal year. That I can tell you. My understanding is that some of the cost increases are based on increased shipping costs and, of course, problems with the pandemic. That is the responsibility of the Ministry of Trade. But what I will tell you is that we will be continuing to focus and push hard on increasing agricultural production and allocating significant sums of money for the agriculture sector in all its facets in terms of land development, irrigation, grants, payment to farmers, purchase of farmers' foodstuffs like through the food basket program of the Ministry of Agriculture, development of abandoned estates, and so on. So yes, you can continue to see a significant emphasis on allocation of funds to the Ministry of Agriculture from the Ministry of Finance and from the government as a whole.
Rishi, did you have another question?
Yes, Rishi Harinana from Rhythms Communications Network again. Minister, this morning we got some reports that over the weekend, the National Lotteries Control Board would have shut down about 500 of those lotto booths. I wanted to find out if you had any information on that. And the reason why we are told is that they were unable to pay some of the monies owed.
Yes. Minister, this is not on
Yes.
the subject. Yes. Minister, this is not on the subjects that you raised. I'm wondering if I can go off topic for a little bit.
Well, you are very dangerous where that is concerned. So you'll have to give me a clue as to what is this extraneous topic you want to talk about.
I'm trying to get some color on the HMB TTMF merger.
Let's talk about that at the end. No problem. I can answer that.
All right. And also on First Citizen Bank's position in the Jamaican company Barita.
Okay, we'll talk about that at the end too.
Okay.
Right.
Prior.
Yes, Minister. Just to go back to the whole issue of the increasing of food prices. the Guyanese government is trying to get the clearing of containers back to the course before the pandemic. Would we try to do something like that? Because I understand that the cost of clearing containers here has multiplied several times and is a lot more than let's say March last year. And I don't know if the government might be looking into something to help stop the rising cost of that.
I haven't had any communication from government of Guyana or my counterpart in Guyana with respect to exactly what they are doing with respect to that matter. I can only go on what is in the media. And what I'm seeing is that what they have decided to do is that the usual taxes, duties, import duty and consumption tax, we call it value-added tax, but other countries have a tax, they call it general consumption tax, which is the same thing. They have decided to base, so it is alleged, because I can only go on what is in the media, and you know how the media is sometimes, not always 100% right. But what I'm seeing in the media is that it is alleged that the Guyanese government is going to charge duty and tax on a price for freight that is not the up-to-date price. In other words, they'll take a price from last year. Let's say a container costs $1,000 US to come from somewhere. They would use that price to compute the duty and the tax. Now, when duty and value-added tax is charged on an imported item, it's on the CIF value. CIF is cost, insurance, and freight. So that when something arrives, the value of the item plus the cost of the freight is computed, and then duty is calculated based on that. Now, if the Guyanese government is using an artificial price for freight, then they're not charging the duty based on the correct price. But again, I want to be very careful here because I've only seen what's in the media, and for all I know, what's in the media is wrong. So I don't really want to go too far with this because I don't know what's going on. And the other problem here is that there are WTO agreements, there are general agreements on tariff and trade, and one has to be very careful on what is doing. So I don't want to say any more. What I would say is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago will charge duties and taxes based on our international obligations. If the Guyanese government can find a way to charge duties and taxes based on some other formula and it is beneficial, well, good for them. But I don't want to comment on that too much because I don't want to get into any situation where I'm commenting on something that may not be fact. It may just be a rumor. It may be fake news. It may be misinterpretation by the media. So I don't know what the facts are there, so I will stop right there.
I believe you have another question from Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Good afternoon, Minister, again. Just wanted to know if you have any information on the airport expansion project. I must ask you that question. And how much monies have been paid out at this time to persons in Tobago? I know you are the man with the money. And in terms of the payments, because I've been speaking with NIDCO, I've been trying to contact NIDCO on the matter for an update, and no one has been able to get in contact with me. I know some residents have been complaining with respect to the airport expansion project in terms of payments. They have not received payments from NIDCO at this time, and the roadways is at this time supposed to be closed off. So I don't know if you have an update.
That's a very roundabout question, Elizabeth. Why not just come straight out with it? Let me tell you what I know. So far, over $180 million has been paid out for land acquisition for the new terminal building project. There's a particular section in the area of land to be acquired because there's quite a lot of land, about 50 acres, I think, has to be acquired. There's a particular section, I think it goes by the name of Section D, I've seen it reported in the papers as Block D as well, but it's D, whatever it is. And in that particular section, there's some confusion as to whether those lands were already acquired and paid for by the state many years ago. I have several reports on it. I've seen very detailed reports giving dates of payment, giving dates of acquisition of some of the lands within that section D. And from what I have seen from the reports I have seen, based on the face of it, quite a bit of the land was already paid for, already acquired, already published as a Section 5 notice of land acquisition. Let me just indicate what that means. You have a Section 3 notice of land acquisition, which indicates an intention by the state to acquire land. You have a Section 4 notice, which allows the state then to take possession and enter onto the land. And you have a Section 5 notice, which completes the process. The land is then formally acquired by law and vested in the state. And I've seen reports going back many, many years where a lot of that land in that Section D area has already been the subject of a Section 5 notice publication many, many years ago, and has already been formally acquired, is now state land and has been paid for. So that now that the situation is in the public domain, I'm investigating. I have not been personally involved with the acquisition, nor could I be. It is Commission of State Lands, it is NITCO, etc., negotiating with the residents and so on. But what I can say off the bat, now that this matter is in the public domain, there are several parcels of land and buildings inside there already paid for, already acquired, already vested in the state, already state land. Then they're no longer private lands. And I've seen some people seeking compensation for lands and buildings which, from the reports that I have seen, have already been acquired by the state many years ago and paid for many years ago. So that what we're doing now at the level of the Ministry of Finance is a full investigation into each one of those matters to find out what the facts are, because the preliminary reports tell us the lands were already acquired and paid for, and some of the people never left. Some of them, the parents owned the land was paid for, their children remained, and the children are now claiming compensation. So it's a very complicated thing, and it may have to be adjudicated by a competent authority like a court of law or something to determine what are the facts, what are the entitlements, because it's not simple. It's just not simple. When you see a Section 5 notice has been published, payment has been made, the owner gave a written undertaking to vacate 15 years ago, didn't vacate, and then now persons are claiming compensation for the same land. It's very complicated. So that we are going to treat this thing very seriously. And one thing I can tell you, Elizabeth, is that whatever information we establish will be published so that people can see what the facts are. That this piece of land, Section 5 notice, was published in 1988 or 1996 or whenever it was. Full and final payment made in 2007 or 2008 or whatever date it was. Undertaken, given by the owner of the land to vacate. All of that will be published so that people can see what the facts are and draw their own conclusions. But it's not a simple thing, and it's not as simple as it appears on the surface, where persons are claiming that they're entitled to payment and they're not being paid. It's nowhere as simple as that. It's a situation where you have land where the records show land already acquired and people claiming compensation for the same piece of land.
Minister, at this point, we just have one question, and that is Anthony Wilson. Sure. So, Anthony, I will ask you to pose your question now.
It's two. Good afternoon again, Minister.
It was two questions, right?
Yes.
With respect to the HMB TTMF merger, that was approved by Cabinet last year, as far as I can recall, some time ago. That has been in the works since before I became Minister of Finance. I met it as a project of the Ministry of Finance when I came in. A lot of work had been done already on that matter under the former administration and even on the administration before that. And it was felt that that's the best thing to do, to merge the two institutions, because HMB deals with the secondary mortgage market, the buying and selling of mortgages, and TTMF deals with primary mortgages, and it was felt there was no need to have the two, and it's better to put the two together. So that's just an ongoing project of the Ministry of Finance that has spanned many administrations, and the National Insurance Board has a responsibility for it because they are the major shareholder.
Any hope of an IPO coming out of that merged entity?
Well, the National Insurance Board has been talking about that. So that the thing that they have to do first is to do the merger, because that is what has been sort of stymied for the last several years. There wasn't clarity on the direction we wanted to go in, but I did make a submission to Cabinet last year and it was approved. So, and there is a proposal on the part of NIB to do an IP. Yes.
Yeah.
And then as your last question, what was it about?
Were you given prior notice, and did you give approval for the investment by the majority state-owned bank for citizens in Barita Investments Limited last September?
Well, that is not something that I am required to give approval for. I've noticed that you're on their case. I see you writing articles about it all the time. And I think the responses from First Citizens have been more than adequate. I mean, from what I'm reading, I read it in the papers today and all. An article about this, that they are saying they made a significant capital gain. The company is doing very, very well. Its profits have increased by over 50%. Using a number, I think it's more than that, 80-something%. So from the First Citizens Bank perspective, it was a good investment. They've made money on it, and it's yielding a good return. This is not something that I as minister would get involved in. But what's your particular interest in all of this?
I muted him.
Unmute him.
Anthony,
what's your particular interest in this Barita thing?
Reporting. It's the state-owned bank.
But is something wrong? Is there something wrong with Barita? Because it seems to be a good investment.
Not as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
I just thought the State Enterprises manual required the Minister of Finance to give approval for all investments overseas by majority state-owned companies.
There is some flexibility when it applies to banks. I mean, if I were to interpret that along the strict lines that you are interpreting, I think Republic Bank would have to do the same thing, not so? So that what we expect that they do, because they do report to us, that they will exercise prudence, that they will exercise their fiduciary responsibilities, and that whatever they do, they get proper advice, expert advice, and that whatever investments they make are good investments. But in terms of me as Minister of Finance having to approve every single investment that Republic Bank makes or First Citizens Bank makes, we don't get into that level of micromanagement. Not with banks of that stature. But of course, if we see something wrong, we would intervene, we would make necessary adjustments, we would take necessary action and so on. But I did not have to approve that investment in Barita Investments. Okay?
Okay.
But I see that FCB is giving a good account of themselves. They're answering you strongly, firmly. So I suggest you keep asking them questions and you'll get good answers out of them. All right, thank you. All right.
So that's it for questions.
Okay, thank you all again for a good press conference. I hope I have been able to shed some light on things, specifically our credit rating. I want to repeat that we have the best credit rating in CARICOM and one of the best in the whole Latin America and Caribbean region, and we are way ahead of many huge countries like Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, and so on. We're better than them in terms of rating. So that, and I want to be specific in terms of the credit rating, not in other things. They will be much better than us in many other things. But in terms of our credit rating, we have a better credit rating than them. And I think it's about time people focus on the positives and stop trying to nitpick on the negatives. And that's why I have focused so much on our credit rating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.